Welcome along to today's webinar. I'm John James and I'm your host for today's event. Today's webinar is being brought to us as a partnership between Future Beef and Beef Central, with funding from the Queensland Government and Meat and Livestock Australia. Now, for the benefit of today's presenter, we're just going to run a quick poll. Today's poll is a little bit different because today's webinar is really only specific for Queensland producers, but others are always welcome to join in. And well, okay, so it's interesting to see. We can see that, well, half the audience is from southeast Queensland, a quarter from central. We've got some people from up north joining us, and of course we've got people from western Queensland as well, so that's great. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have Craig Turner joining us to deliver the presentation, It Doesn't Rain Money, Opportunities for Restocking and Recovery in Queensland. Craig is the Manager of Customer Relations for the Queensland Rural Adjustment Authority, better known as QRAA. He's been doing that for about 7 years now, and before that he spent a couple of years as the Client Liaison Officer out in Roma. Before working with QRAA, Craig spent 21 years in the wool industry and had both state and national management roles with Elders and Landmark. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Craig to our webinar today.
Terrific. Thanks, John, and good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to spend time with you today, and I'd like to thank you all for your interest. John's already asked a question or two, but I'd also like to ask a question, of the people that are online. Have basically, if you could put your hands up if you've already commenced restocking out of this last dry period.
About 3 now. So I guess the answer is not many, Craig.
Yeah, and I guess we've got a collection of producers and consultants on the line. So and that's terrific. So look, what we're going to talk about today is as it says, opportunities for restocking and recovery. And so what is on offer today? Well, we're going to talk about what's available to allow you to restock economically. And we'll discuss the drought recovery concessional loans in that space. We'll also talk about what else is available to provide working capital, and we'll look at the drought concessional loans. And then the last area is, providing I talk quick enough, is that we'll look at a drought proofing and preparedness for the future. And in that we'll review some of the opportunities that the QRAA sustainability loans present to get you on the front foot for the next time that we've got conditions to deal with. So if we look at a bit of a snapshot of the programs that we're going to talk about, the drought recovery, the drought recovery concessional loan and the drought concessional loan, they're both federally funded. These drought-related loans, so the closing date for these currently is the 31st of October 2016, and that's an extension from the federal government already from the 30th of June. And I suppose an overarching point, and we'll talk about it again at the end of the drought concessional loan segment, is that an enterprise may not borrow more than a combined $2 million through the federal drought loans. The sustainability loans, which we'll talk about last, they are Queensland state government funded. They're only available here in Queensland, although I'm aware of a few other states that would like to be able to access them. And the sustainability loans and our First Start loans, which are used for entering primary production or succession, they're available year-round. There's no closing dates. The funds are always available. With any of the programs that we're talking about today, there are no fees and charges. So that's a standard thing with the QRAA. There are no fees and charges with our loans. So we're going to skip now to the drought recovery concessional loan, and these loans are available for planting and or restocking, but the focus is very much today on restocking. But of course we're always happy to take questions or calls from people that want to talk about the planting aspect of it. So we're able to lend 50% of eligible farm debt to a maximum of $1 million under this scheme. So now eligible farm debt in this instance, that'll be term loans. It could be a revolving facility if people are with Rabo, or line of credit with Rabo. But what it doesn't include is machinery leases or chattel mortgages. It doesn't include loans from families, and it doesn't include QRAA loans because they're already deemed to be at a concessional rate. So it's, yeah, basically, I guess if you look at the drought recovery loans that we've already written, the average amount is somewhere between 300 and 500,000. It really depends on the scale of the enterprise, but bottom line is 50% of eligible farm debt can be utilised to borrow, and this is new debt in this instance. Currently, the interest rate on these loans is 2.66%. And that's to start with is on an interest-only basis. So the loans are 10-year term, but first 5 years are interest-only, and then from years 6 to 10, it's principal and interest, which does mean that there is a bit of a balloon payment to be made at the end, but that could be refinanced by a commercial lender. And as I said, the eligible uses are replanting and restocking. I think it's important to note that, you know, this funding is available to restock now and for up to at least 6 months after the loan's approved. Now, in certain cases where we acknowledge that it may take longer than that to restock, and we do have the facility to be able to extend the use of that loan beyond 6 months after approval. So we really do encourage producers finance in place now, and then they can focus on their restocking strategy and the other things that they need to do within their business. So it's something that you can basically set and forget. In terms of the eligibility for this loan, there are 3 ways to be eligible, and that is that your enterprise is currently in a 1 in 100 or 1 in 50 year rainfall deficiency. You might be, particularly if you're up north, you may be in a 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 year rainfall deficiency, but you're also impacted by live X. Or if you're not in a 1 in 100 or 1 in 50 years, there is the opportunity to show what you can do. Show the impact of drought by looking at the last 3 years' impact of that drought. So now, first thing is, everyone needs to supply a Bureau of Meteorology rainfall deficiency report. They're available through the QRAA website, and we'll look at that in a little bit more detail. Now, with the drought recovery loan, where you don't need to be in a deficiency anymore, even if that map shows that you're not in a deficiency, rainfall deficiency, you still need to supply a map, or a report, I should say. So applications are accepted and accessible if there has been significant financial impact, and we'll look at that a little bit later about demonstrating that 3 years of impact from drought. And as I said a bit earlier, restocking now or after you're certain of summer rainfall does not matter, but applying by 31st of October actually does. That is the closing date. So we'll move on to some tips and tools, I suppose, and one of the things with this drought recovery is the funding is for all associated costs with restocking. That is the purchase of the livestock, the cartage of the livestock, any additional supplements that you need, could even go down to the cost of buying new NLAS tags or application equipment, that sort of stuff. And as I said before, the funding through this scheme relies on commercial debt as the gateway to eligibility. That is, there needs to be debt in order to determine how much money we can lend. So I've pitched a few questions that are common that we've got. And so the first one is, what if I reduce my debt with sales and forced sales during the drought? Well, that's no problem for us to still be able to assist. In terms of what we'd suggest is identify the forced sales, because we actually expect people have paid down debt using using their stock sales or forced sales. So if you can work out what your normal core debt levels are prior to the sell down, the bank can normally help you with this information as well. But basically what we'll be looking at is what are the normal limits that you operate in. So when it's not a drought, and what are the normal limits that you operate in, and that will generally give us a pretty fair idea of what your core debt is. It may be that the facilities that you normally have are still in place, so that will be a reasonable guide. So in terms of the next question, and this is I've tried to keep it as simple as possible, but if you're borrowing what if I have no debt? Well, if you're borrowing to restock, that is, you may have paid your debt down, but now in order to restock you have to borrow money. If you're borrowing to restock, QRAA can fund 1/3 of the total cost of restocking. So very simple example here on screen for you. If restocking will cost you $300,000, if you borrow $200,000 from the bank, then you can apply to QRAA to fund 50% of that commercial debt. That would equate, in this case, to $100,000. So I need $300,000 to restock. Instead of going to the bank for the full $300,000, you go to them for $200,000. Tell us I've borrowed $200,000 from the bank. I'm applying for a QRAA drought recovery concessional loan. That will be commercial debt at 50%. Therefore, there's your $100,000. So even if you haven't got debt today, but you are borrowing to restock, there is still an opportunity for us to assist you at that interest rate of 2.66%. So it's important to remember that these federal drought loans rely on commercial debt as the gateway. That's the critical message. So I've got another question for everyone attending. Can you put your hand up if you've been running cattle but think you'll restock with some sheep when you start restocking?
Great. So I'm just watching to see anyone raising their hands, but alas, no, they're all a bit sheepish.
Oh,
sorry, Craig.
John, I reckon you put them up to that. Ladies and gentlemen, I had to remove a number of sheep photos from this presentation because I was going to use this as the way of marching the merino back into Queensland. But anyway, so John was right. I'm glad I put plenty of photos of yaks up there and took the sheep out. But so the question here is, I was running cattle, but I wish to restock with sheep, and I can certainly tell you that some of the loans that we've approved in the last couple of months, people around Buckholden and Longreach, particularly if they've got exclusion fencing in place, they're looking at that option. And in some cases, wool sheep may actually give a quicker return than some cattle purchases. So it's no problem whether to use these loans to restock with a different species. So we can lend for livestock purchases equivalent to the usual DSE or AE carrying capacity of your property. So it can be a mixture of livestock type or description, sheep or cattle, breeders or steers. So you may need to show us the numbers that you had prior to destocking, and this could be showing us past stock schedules or financials. But in general terms, if you can, tell us what the normal carrying capacity of the place is, what you're restocking, and look, there's no doubt some of the restocking programs, they're not going to happen overnight. So a number of people they're putting forward their restocking programs to maybe restock to 2/3 of their normal carrying capacity, build enough cash flow, and then be able to go and purchase more afterwards. So I've kind of answered the next question a little bit, but if breeders are too expensive, can I buy trade cattle? Yes. It's not for us to dictate how you run your enterprise. So you know what's best for your business, you know what's best for the country that you're operating. So, and as I say there, these low interest loans are only part of the overall recovery program. So, if you want trade cattle to give you a quick turnover and quick cash flow, that's fine. If you want to do a mixture of both, no problem. So a few stakeholders had raised the idea of explaining the drought management plan. So here we go. frankly, I think it looks pretty easy when you look at the application form, which is available on our website, but it's been raised, so we're going to talk about it a bit. So I've made the first faux pas of the day. Well, I'll say it's the first, and then I've said it's a rainfall deficiency map, when of course it's clearly a rainfall deficiency report, and it's quite critical that we are dealing with the report. Now, I know it's not super clear on your screen, but this is the best we could do to get it onto the screen. And what this, so just remembering too that even if your place doesn't show a deficiency, you still need to supply this report. The link to the Rainfall Deficiency Analyzer is on the QRAA website, and you will need your property's GPS coordinates in order to generate this. Now, it doesn't matter whether you do the coordinates at the homestead, on your most western boundary or northern boundary, or what. It's as long as we ultimately can check it against your property details and note that these coordinates are on your place. The currency of this report is 60 days, and the maps are updated by the Bureau on the 22nd of each month. So, you know, particularly as things got drier, sometimes people weren't showing up, or the enterprises weren't showing up on the map, but they waited another month and they were in. But as I said, these are good for 60 days. So once you've got one, I urge you to talk to your local client liaison officer or talk to us in here and get that application underway. What this report's telling us is where you are and what sort of rainfall deficiency your place has experienced. And we'll use those coordinates, as I said, to just make sure you are where you are and you are who you are. So, oh look, sheep. Anyway, we move on to the next part of the drought management plan, and these are a series of questions that were set up in the program initially, and of course we've already looked at the deficiency report, and that ties in with the first question, that's in the plan. So are you in a 1 in 50 or 1 in 100? Are you a 1 in 10, 1 in 20? Or, if you're not, what was what were the impacts? And now that's when we're moving on to evidence of significant financial impact. So here we're looking for information about forced destocking through forced sales or movement of stock to agistment or feedlots, buying additional fodder, purchasing water. It could be that you had crop failure. You normally use oats to fatten, and you couldn't get any crops up. And also any expenses that you've put towards trying to reduce the impact of drought. So it may be that you've desilted dams, that sort of stuff. I guess the other thing is that you may state, and we know a number of people had to do it, it's not ideal, but they've dealt with people deal with these circumstances the best they can, and so it might be that you've one of the family members or part of one of the partnership members have taken off-farm income, have taken an off-farm job. So you might even put in there that we've had to take on additional off-farm work to help us get through this drought. So again, it's really just telling us about what has happened on your place, and in a grazing operation, the most obvious impact, or significant financial impact, is going to be forced sales, destocking, taking on agistment or sending cattle away on agistment or lease. So the next thing is drought preparedness activities, and again, it basically, you tell us what you've done when you did it, and that could be things like the desilting, increasing dam capacities, adding additional watering points. It might be, again, the just destocking, pure and simple. How do you How do you mitigate drought? Well, we destock. Or it might be the purchase of fodder. The other thing that you might put in there, because I think we've certainly seen this in the west and the southwest, is I'd also, if you've undertaken exclusion fencing programs, put it in. It's a significant, financial outlay for you. But it's also having a significant impact on ground cover and the recovery of country. So if you put in exclusion fencing, put that in there as well. The next part of the application is livestock and cropping management. So again, we've already touched on this really. State the normal carrying capacity DSE or AE, and you may want to go back and show us the numbers that you had on hand in your 12-13 financials, or showing us older stock schedules. That's another way. But in that there's a table, and I've not loaded it on this screen. I didn't want to be too busy, but basically we're asking, what did you have prior to the drought? What have you currently got? And how did we get to that point? That's really what it boils down to. Not too many more of these. So the next, the other thing too, with cropping management, if people do grow oats or whatever, or you do have sometimes a cropping program within your enterprise, you might highlight that you had low yields or that you fed the crop-offs to livestock. In some places where there's irrigation, people have had their water allocations cut, so that's very clear impact. The final thing on this screen that we're talking about is the confirmation of the seasonal conditions. Now this is what we need in order to know that we can fund the restocking. So for example, we've got people now sending in their drought management plan. They were approved the loan 6 months ago. They're now putting in, they're now submitting this part of the drought management plan saying, I've received X number of inches of rain, I've got ground cover of X, I've got herbage growth, I'm ready to go. And we're therefore funding them. So here, and John, just a quick note, this could be worth putting up with this webinar, the long paddock web address as well, because clearly the long paddock, rainfall and pasture outlooks and some really good reports that can certainly support someone wanting to prove that they're now ready to restock. So provide us details on herbage growth, tell us what your groundwater supplies are like, give us some insight into the rainfall that your district has received in recent months, and discuss the stage restocking that you may be undertaking as the season progresses. So none of it's rocket surgery. It's really what, it's the things that you look at every day. It's the things that you consider in your business every day. We're just asking you to tell us what you're thinking. So in my ever forward-moving quest to get more white-faced cattle back into Queensland, this guy's asking, have you got any questions or comments about drought recovery concessional loans?
Great, thanks for that, Craig. At the moment there aren't any questions, so can I clarify, are you now at the end of your presentation?
I've just noticed the time. I was going to quickly go through drought concessional loans, but we can stop there. The information is certainly on our website, and certainly there's information within the presentation. I know that we had a couple of questions on notice, and I'm happy to answer those next if that would suit you, John.
Yeah, sure. So actually, if you have those handy, could you just read out the question and then give the answer? That'll be great. Thanks, Craig.
Yep. So we had a couple of questions, and I'll start with two that were quite similar, one from Jim Rich and one from Warwick Simpson. So Jim asked, when is the $2 million coming in? And Warwick asked, when will maximum limits on QRAA loans be lifted to a realistic amount? What I can say on that is we can only deal with what we have at the moment. So in the current terms of sustainability loans, that's 650,000. In the terms of these federal drought loans that we're talking about, that's that's $1 million each, up to a maximum of 2 million combined. But the state government did make an announcement in their budget earlier this year that our first start loans, which are there to get into primary production and stage progression into primary production, and also succession, will be increased to $2 million, and that the sustainability loans, of which there's information on this presentation towards the end, which they're going to be increased to, they've been suggested that they'll be increased to $1.3 million. That's up to the government to implement, and so at the moment we can't tell you when that may happen. What we do know is at the moment we've got loans of 650,000. People are using them, and we encourage people to talk to us about their plans and to see what we can do for them. There was also a question from Berend Hacks, and that was, what's the tipping point between restocking and selling the property? That's probably for others to answer, but what I would say is, of course, it really depends on enterprises' debt levels and the productive capacity of the operation. So there's no doubt there's a number of people at the moment that are going through that discussion at home. We've seen people that have destocked over a longer period of time. They read the seasons particularly well. They've paid down debt. They've put money into farm management deposits. They're ready to rock and roll again. Other people didn't get the roll of the dice as well as others. So it really does come down to those things. But as for an academic analysis of it, I'm not your man. But that's certainly, debt levels are going to be critical in that discussion. The other question I noticed we had was from Mitch Sharrock. Now, is there access for debt facilities for a livestock training enterprise? Now, I had two answers here. If we're talking about restocking for a feedlot, we can't use the drought recovery loan for that. That's on the basis that these loans aren't for carry on, and a feedlot buys and sells cattle every day of the week. If I interpret it the other way, that is, we can use drought recovery loans for livestock trading enterprises, assuming that the applicant derives the majority of their income and spends the majority of their labour in the enterprise, that it is a viable enterprise, and that there's an agreed security position can be set. So it may not necessarily be landed. It may be a mixture of landed and stock, but nonetheless, it doesn't matter if you're breeding or a cattle training enterprise. If you are full-time, if you spend the majority of your labour and derive the majority of your income from primary production and you're viable, then we can discuss these loans. I will cover off on one other thing that wasn't a question here, but I will touch on it. It seems to have become a point of intrigue again in the last few days. QRAA don't insist on first mortgage. We normally do need landed security, but in any of our loans, we will talk to your commercial lender about what is the best security arrangement to allow you to keep on doing what you do best, and to keep the bank happy and to keep us secured. So we'll take a second or third mortgage if there's room. Sometimes if the cash flow shows that you need to borrow more money from the bank beyond the assistance that we're giving, then sometimes the bank will put us up front, will give us first priority. But it seems to be a bit of a misconception that we insist on first mortgage, and that's not the case. The other thing I'd say is we're always, we do talk to everyone's bank when we're doing this stuff. We want to work in with them, and we, in most cases, we get really good support from the commercial lenders. Thanks, John.
Great, thanks Craig. Okay, we're running a little bit out of time here. So Craig, thank you for sharing all that really good information and particularly for sharing all those tips to your frequently asked questions. That's great. And a big thank you to all our attendees for coming along today and interacting with us. Now, don't forget that you can sign up for the daily emails from the Beef Central crew if you haven't done so already. And you do that by just popping over to beeffcentral.com. And don't forget that you're welcome to visit our Future Beef website, your one-stop shop for beef information across Northern Australia. Now, in due course, you'll find the webinar recording on our website, and as I said earlier, I'll send you the link for that later on. And while you're at our website, of course, don't forget to sign up to receive our e-bulletins. Just use the little link over here under Sign Up, and that way you'll hear about future webinars as well. Now, of course, we'll be taking time to ask you for your feedback on today's event, and we'll be doing that online. And again, I'll send you that link in my follow-up email. So, folks, that's all for today. Thanks for coming along and interacting with us today. Thanks again, Craig, for joining us. And I wish everyone all the best until we meet again. Hooroo for now.